Hi everybody, I'm Stefan for cgtutsplus.com, and in today's tutorial we are going to create a cool disco ball whoop. So let's get started. First of all, let's create a sphere, and we need to increase the segments of the sphere quite a bit. And the next thing that we are going to do is to come to MoGraph menu and select extrude, and then make the extrude child of the sphere. And as you can see, we already have kind of a disco ball effect, so we need to set the extrusion steps to 1 to reduce the extrusion. As you can see what it does, so we need to set this to 1. And now let's create a new camera and let's position it, zero out the rotation and position, and let's hit Ctrl B for the render settings and come to output and select 1000 by 1000 pixels, and we are okay now. And just set the camera to -300 or just like so, and we need to animate the disco ball to rotate. But before that, we are going to use the HDRI Studio Rig by Grayscale Gorilla. Just double click to set it in a scene, and we need to load a reflection map for the disco ball to reflect. So I'm going to use a custom one which I shot by myself. It's just a simple JPEG. We are not going to use global illumination for this project. So let me show you the image, how it looks like. It's just some Christmas decorations out of focus, and I thought it is going to be a good reflection map for the disco ball. So let's close this, let's create a new material. Let's come to reflection and just enable the reflection, and that's it. It should be 100% reflective, and if we do a render, you can see how the result looks like. So we can select our disco ball and set the duration to 300 frames. Come to the first frame, set a keyframe for the rotation, come to the last frame and set this to 360. Set another keyframe, and as you can see, we have a rotation. Now let's hit Shift F3 to bring up the timeline. Select our sphere, come to our curve editor here, select the rotation and just make it linear, and close the timeline, and now it will rotate in a linear way, because by default Cinema starts the animation slowly, then rotates, and then at the end slowly stops. And if we want a perfect whoop, we need a 100% linear animation. So that's it. We need to come to the render settings once again and enable the anti-aliasing. 1x1 by 4x4 should do the work. And if we do a render, our disco ball looks great. So we need just to specify where the output location to be and what format, and in this case I'm going to use the PNG with alpha channel. So that's it. we need to render this out and jump into After Effects to composite. But before do that, let me show you something. You don't need to use the HDR Studio rig. You can just put a sky object and just drag and drop the shader onto the sky object. Right click, Cinema 4D tags, Compositing, and just click the scene by camera checkbox. And this way, if we delete our HDR Studio rig, the result will be the same. Just you know that you can do it without the HDR Studio rig. So now let's render this out and jump into After Effects and composite it. Here we are in After Effects. So let's take our disco ball and just create a new composition, which is going to be a full HD composition, and click OK, and put the disco ball whoop right here. And let's see, we need to trim the composition a bit, set the frame rate to 30, and that's our disco ball. We need to color correct it a bit, so I'm going to duplicate the disco ball, set it to screen so it's a bit brighter, create a new adjustment layer, come to Effect, Color Correction, Levels, and I'm going to just make the blacks a bit stronger and probably increase the brightness of the whites a bit, and basically give it just a bit contrast. And now let's hit Ctrl K for composition settings, and let's go with ball CC for color correction, and hit OK. Now come to the project, take this composition and drop it into a new composition, and let's rename this one main, and click OK. And first of all, we need to make our disco whites for the background, and to do that I'm going to do another composition, and let's go with disco whites, create a new solid, and let's go with particles, and come to Effect, Trap Coat Particular, and we are going to use Trap Coat Particular to generate these white beams in the background. So to do that, open the emitter and set the emitter type to sphere. After that, we need to change the Z position a bit, so it's a bit further away from the camera, and the position subframe we need to change it to 10 times linear to get a smoother results. And we need to set the velocity to 0, velocity random to 0, velocity distribution to 0, velocity from motion, and the size of the emitter. Basically zero out all the settings here. Come to emission extras and set the pre-run to 100, and what the pre-run does is basically, if we are at the beginning, and let's increase the velocity a bit, if we set this to 0, you can see that there are no particles in our scene yet, and when we move forward in time they start to emit. And if we set the pre-run to 100%, we have already emitted particles and they exist in our scene. So that's what the pre-run does. And let's zero out the velocity again, and come to the close this tab and come to the particle tab, and let's see, let's set the OIF to 0.5, and let's change the particle type to a glow sphere, and let's set the feather to 25%. We don't want to be so soft, and let's set the size to something like 3 maybe. And now we need to set the opacity over OIF for the particles to this preset right here, and you don't see anything yet because we need to tweak some more settings. And for the core I'm going to use random from gradient, and probably we'll choose this preset right here. And now open the physics tab, but before do that, set this to add the blending mode. Open the physics tab, open the air, and now let's open the turbulence field and set the effect position to 1000 maybe. And as you can see, we have something that moves so far, but we need to tweak more settings. Let's set the scale to 700, and this way this is going to move like crazy, very fast. And we need to set the octave scale a bit higher, and basically I think this is it. Maybe change the evolution speed to 20, or 35, and I think we are ready with this part here. And let's come to our aux system right here and click continuously, and this way you can see we emit some particles, and we need to set the particles per second to kind of something like that, and also decrease the width to 0.1 on 0.2 as well. Set the size to a lower size, probably 1 or 1.5, maybe 2. 1.6 should do the job. And we need to set the opacity for the particles and set it to 40, and basically that's it. Now we need to core from main particles. You can change it to 100% on, or leave it like that. I prefer to leave it like that in this case. And the particles type, we can change it to sphere, or just leave it like so. And I think this is it. Now we can try to play with the Z position of our particles, but I think not 200 should work fine. And now we are ready with this. Just to set the core from main to 100% in order to get more colorful results. Come to effect, trap code, shine, and come to colorize and set it to none. This way the shine will get the color from the particles, and increase the boost white a bit, and probably set this to kinda like so. And this is a part of our disco white, so we need to create a new layer, and let's call it OF for optical flares, because we are going to use optical flares, but you can use any other plugin for lens flare like no white factory. And the flare type doesn't matter really. We need to come to core and type WIGO 5,500. In this way we are going to wiggle the core of our lens flare and do the same with the brightness wiggle 3,200. And as you can see, probably 800, we have some crazy flare flickering. And set this to screen, and as you can see, this will help increase the intensity of our disco whites effect. Probably set the initial scale of the flare to 50% and set the blending mode to add. So this is our disco whites, and we need to drop it here, duplicate it, set it to add, and duplicate it once again, set this to normal, probably scale it up and just flip it, and we need to come to our optical flares and set the render mode to on transparent in order to get an alpha channel, and set this to screen, duplicate it and set it to add, and we should have something like this. Now we need to composite our disco ball, so let's make a few copies of the disco ball and set the first one to add, and come to effect, bore and sharpen, and apply a fast bore and set it to 50%, and just copy the fast bore, paste it to the next one, set the blending mode to add and set this to 100 pixels bore, and set this to 200 pixels bore on the third disco ball and set the blending mode to add. And this way we have kind of a glow effect here. And we need to take our final disco ball right here and apply edge bore, and probably I'm going to sew this layer to see better, and set the edge bore amount to 8 maybe, and leave the rest as it is. Come to effect, stylize and apply a glow, and we need to set the radius of the glow way higher, just like so. As you can see, the disco ball looks far better now, and we need to apply finally a star glow filter. So come to trap code, star glow, and we are going to use a white star preset. Come to pre-process and set the threshold a bit higher, so as you can see only the brightest parts of our disco ball get the glow effect. So this is it for our disco ball, and we need to create a new layer, and let's make it square in order to be easier for us to create a perfect square. And we need to create a track mat for our disco ball, and in order to do that we are going to feather it just a bit, set the opacity to 100% and duplicate our disco ball and track mat, set the alpha to alpha inverted mat and set this to add in order to create this nice glow edge right here around our disco ball. So this is it, and let's see. The project went a bit heavy, so I recommend pre-rendering the disco whites and then putting them right here. And we can come here and increase the boost white for the shine, maybe. And in our main composition we can apply hue and saturation and just boost the saturation of the white beams like so. And basically that's the disco ball type of effect. Hope you like it and this tutorial was useful for you. Once again, I'm Stefan for cgtutspos.com and we'll see you next time.